Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here this afternoon to be with us. So, I'm back. It's Carl here. I'm back to resume hosting duties today for part 4 in our webinar series celebrating the recent release of Doors 9.7. Thank you once again for joining us. We're delighted from Persistent Systems to host you and be able to take you through another exciting webinar around Doors 9.7. Today, we will be discussing the importance of a change control or change management process and how this links back into Doors 9.7 for traceability and governance around requirements and making sure change is captured efficiently. So before we begin, a few housekeeping announcements. All participants will be on mute throughout the webinar and we will be recording this session. If you do not agree, you may disconnect at any time. The recording will be posted to the landing page in due course for you to view again or share with any of your colleagues. We would encourage you to share this and you can also go back and view the other webinars in our series on this link also. If you do have any questions, then we'd recommend using the chat window and addressing this to all panelists or the Q&A box so we can address them at the relevant time or at the end. If you do wish to elaborate on your question, then we can unmute your line as well if required. Okay, so as we said, it's part 4. For those of you who haven't been able to join us, we did kick off the series talking about Doors 9.7, giving you a flavour of the new features and highlights of the release and why it's significant. We've then moved on to talk about the introduction of AI and how test management can be incorporated to get end-to-end traceability within the software systems engineering. Today's webinar should be another area of interest to anyone within these divisions to help ensure that changes are monitored and approved accordingly. We think it's all about ensuring change is captured, filtered through, and regulated when necessary to avoid costly errors in production and making sure everyone is on the same page. So I'm joined today by Matt Bradshaw from Persistent, but before I hand over to Matt to take us through the session, I just briefly wanted to introduce Persistent for those of you who couldn't attend in the last sessions or aren't aware of us. So Persistent undertake the development of many solutions on behalf of IBM, including Doors and the extended ELM or Engineering Lifecycle Management solution you may hear about also. And this really is our area of focus and expertise. So with so many stakeholders, both internal and external, providing feedback on project requirements, it's certainly something we're speaking to a lot of our customers about, how we can capture and cascade change efficiently. I think it's a common challenge that change needs to be recognized and captured and flowed through the different teams as early as possible to avoid costly changes. So yeah, I think it's going to be a very exciting session today, and another vitally important lessons I'm sure we can all learn from Matt. So without further delay, Matt, I'll hand over to you to take us through the content for today's webinar.
Thank you, Carl. So my role, and just to give you a brief introduction on myself, I'm Matthew Bradshaw. I'm one of the solution architects with Persistent. So I've worked with the IBM engineering toolkit for the last sort of 8 years. Spent 6 years of that time within IBM. And the last 2 years, I've been on secondment to Persistent Systems, kind of bringing some of that technical expertise and helping Persistent grow its presence in the UK as part of a wider move to kind of a European expansion. So very experienced with the tools, covering from all the way from requirements through change, which is what we'll look at a bit today, source code management and testing. And I'm suffering with a bit of a cold, so if I go on mute for a little while, it's probably just me having a bit of a cough. I've got a bit of an issue with my throat today, but hopefully you can hear me okay, and I'm not too croaky during this. But to kick this off, then we'll jump through some slides, just to kind of set the scene in terms of what we're going to be discussing today, and the bulk of the webinar will be a demo into how this actually works within the kind of end-to-end engineering toolkit. And this is a kind of a capability that you can use with Doors 9.7 as we're kind of showing today, but this does go back a few versions as well in terms of how this piece of functionality works, managing your requirements in a change control process. But obviously we wanted to highlight as part of this webinar series, part of the main reason for kicking this off is the release of DOIS 9.7. So there is a full webinar on this, which was the first one in the series to discuss all those new features. And there's a few usability things in there and some things that make your life easier as an administrator. If you want details on those, you can look at the first webinar. But part of this release was to integrate more tightly into the wider engineering lifecycle solution that we have that does cover everything from requirements all the way through to testing. There is a product that works called DOIS Next Generation, for those of you that aren't familiar, which is a kind of a modern web-based tool, but we understand lots of customers still are reliant on DOIS and they still have heavy investment in that as a product. So we really wanted to bring this release out with some new features as well as kind of increase some of the integration capabilities that it has with the wider toolkit, and we're going to be showcasing some of those today in terms of how you can track a change control process in tandem with your requirements. So really the engineering tools that we're looking at are designed to cover this entire V model of lifecycle, as I've kind of already alluded to. So within DOIS or DOIS Next, you can track requirements starting at the highest level and break those down and decompose them into more and more granular levels of detail. Maintaining traceability, so you can show where requirements have been sourced, and you can demonstrate compliance that you've built things out correctly and you've got all the relevant stages of the design completed correctly. But to finish off the rest of the V, you want to have that validation on the right hand side to cover the requirements to say, at each stage of the system engineering process, we've done our testing, we've got results that show pass fail verdicts, and we can demonstrate our proof of work. And sitting down at the bottom of the V here, we've got this implementation or change control process, which is what we're going to be looking at today. So any activity that you have within requirements or testing or modeling, which is another element that we've not really talked about, you can track tasks and change of those items using workflow management or rational team concept, for those of you that are still familiar with some of the older terms in terms of what the tools are called. So we're really going to be focusing on the left-hand side of the V today with that implementation and change side in terms of how we can make use of a change control tool to put process enforcement around our requirements, elicitation and creation. So this wider engineering toolkit has lots of different capabilities in it. This is all around change and implementation. So there's kind of two elements of that within here. Managing change control against requirements and testing and other things, as well as rolling that information up into project plans so we can see overall project status in terms of what is the current progress through the work that we've defined that needs to be completed. That sits within the same capability of source code management. So, quite often, companies that use these tools will develop software and do embedded systems with systems engineering, and software is kind of a key element of that. So you can have the software elements brought into that as well. It's kind of not the focus of this discussion, so it's grayed out a little bit there, but that capability is there. But really, from this kind of project planning or change control system, we can allocate work out to people in the team, overall project plans to see progress, as I say, and we can work in a variety of different ways. It could be an agile approach, or it could be a more formal waterfall style, or something in between. It's completely configurable for you to choose how you want to do that. And one of the key things we'll see today is around traceability, obviously, so we can show where requirement changes are kind of linked to the logical change or the actual requirement change request that has been raised, and a level of method enforcement. So if you need to go through an approval cycle or make sure attributes are filled in or all that sort of stuff, we can use the tool to help us enforce our users to follow the correct process. And we'll see a couple of options of that demonstrated later on today. So just to reiterate on this point then, the engineering tools covers requirements, modeling and design, your planning and development activities, as well as testing. And the tools, as an end-to-end point of view, are designed to cover your traceability between the different domains. So the tools are built to ensure that you have a single source of the truth, and we don't want to have to copy data from requirements to testing or duplicate anything. We want to keep it where it should be and create traceability links between the other domains to show where relationships exist. So in the instance of the V model, where we want to have tests that validate our requirements, we want to be able to have that as a traceability link that we can see and show that to demonstrate compliance. But the key thing here is, you may have a requirement that needs to be implemented. And with the different domains that exist, you want to have traceability between them to show all the relationships. And you can have a very rich web, a very rich network of related artifacts. And the topic of today's discussion, what happens if we do get a change request that gets raised? We can have traceability from that change request to the requirements that are impacted, the tests that are being impacted, potentially any work that needs to be redone, or any model designs that need to be updated as well. So it's very easy for you to impact assess what needs to be done, what the overall impact and downstream change impact of the change would be. And this works across the tools here, as we can see, but we're going to be focusing on it from a requirements point of view today, using DOIS 9.7. There is a similar mechanism within DOIS Next if you're using configuration management, which is a topic for another day potentially, but that is something that we've built into the tools, independent of which requirements capability you're using, DOIS Classic or DOIS Next. But we're going to be focusing on DOIS Next, DOIS Classic, should I say, DOIS 9.7 today. So this is an option that you turn on within your DOIS client. So within your requirements, you enforce the need to have to work within a change control process. So you'll see in the demo, once we open up a requirements module, it is locked only as a read-only module. We can see what the requirements are, but we can't actually make any changes to those. And the system will prevent us from updating those unless we've got an actual change request that's been raised. So this is where the tighter integration to DOIS, from DOIS to the wider engineering tools comes in. We can have a change request raised within the workflow management tool, a series of attributes that we can see here on the right-hand side that we use to track that and progress it through a workflow as we resolve, do our impact assessment and do peer reviews and approvals before actually applying those changes to the set of requirements once we've ticked all the boxes and we're happy with those changes. So if you are working then within a change process and a change control, once you have that raised, you can make changes to the requirements, but things, rather than being saved and updated directly into the database, they get logged with the change request itself, the actual differences between them, and you can see a nice comparison view of this when you have this set up. And yes, that's pretty much it really. You can see what the latest state is. It's all linked to the change request process, and once it's approved, you can then choose to apply those to the actual master set of requirements. Within our example that we're looking at here, there's a workflow that we've defined, which we can see at the top here. So once we raise a new change request, it can then be marked as in progress, and then it goes through a review and an approval stage, and finally it gets accepted once it's delivered and those changes are actually made on the actual system. And you'll see as part of the demo, certain actions within DOIS and certain actions within the workflow management on the change request itself trigger things to happen. So once I've signed off a requirement, for example, on an approval, it will move it to the next state. And there's a couple of examples of that we'll see here. So as part of setting this up, this is just an example workflow that we've defined as part of the demo. But you can use something that you've got today, or potentially, copy this or create something that's relevant for your current way of working, but you can link it to certain changes within DOIS. So the actions actually trigger follow-on actions, and we'll see that again as part of the demo shortly. So that was it in terms of the initial introduction point of view. I'm just going to switch to a separate machine which has got DOIS running on now to show you the actual demo. So once that loads, hopefully you can see that. I guess it's a point to raise any questions at this point before we jump into the demo. Carl, has anything been raised?
No questions so far, Matt, and we can see your screen just fine.
Perfect, okay. So we've got a series of requirements modules here within this DOIS instance, and some of them are version controlled, some of them are not. So I can open up my stakeholder requirements document here, which is version controlled. And once it loads, it brings up this screen here to select a requirement change request. That's what the acronym ICI stands for here. And we can see there are no open change requests here. So I'm going to open this in the read-only mode. So I can view the module here in terms of seeing the information, the headings, the images, the subsections that are below that. But everything's grayed out because it can't be edited. It's telling me down here that it's a read-only mode, and I can't actually see the changes, but I can still do things like, look at the different views I've got created and see where traceability is in place for the actual module. So that's just that's the user interface you get from a module that's been put under change control. So we have a menu item here on the toolbar at the top that we can use, and I'm going to submit a new change request here because I want to actually update some of these requirements. So this could be something that I raise just as part of my day-to-day way of working, or this could be something that comes centrally from a change control board, and I would just then select it from the list that we previously looked at to show what changes are available to log the requirement changes against. It's asking me to log in. So this is a representation window from the web-based tools, the Jazz platform of engineering tools, which encompasses the workflow management stuff that we've been talking about so far. So I will need to have a login to that. But then once I have logged in and it refreshes it, I can submit that change request now. And we should see a window here now into our configuration. So we've got a series of different work items defined to track things like tasks and defects that we might have found within the project. If we're doing model reviews, we can track those here, track risks on the project potentially as well. But down here at the bottom, we've got an actual requirement change request work item type that we use to log our specific requirement changes again. So I can put a summary in here now for a change that needs to be made. So some of the requirements within here refer to the period of comfort that you're sat from within the car. You need to be able to travel in comfort for X amount of time. So we're going to make a change to that. I'm just going to put in some information here. We've had some information come in from some extra user research or some initial feedback from our end products or our customer, and we want to make the change now before we get too far down our implementation. We're still at the very early stages in terms of the stakeholder requirements here. We've not created too many system requirements or tests or anything yet, so we want to make sure this is correct at the start to kind of reduce our downstream issues. So there's some attributes that we can set and change here, so I can assign it against a particular team or a different category just to help me organize what change requests are related to different things. I'm going to assign it to myself. So this demo is slightly artificial in the sense that I'm going to be logged in as the same user. I'm going to create the change, approve the change, accept the change. All the kind of actions will be done by myself, but you can have different users within your environments, potentially senior users or senior requirements analysts sign certain things off at certain stages. It wouldn't all be done by the same person. So in this example, I'm going to assign it to myself, but it would be another person potentially in the project if I wanted it to be. Things like priorities and when it needs to be completed, we can fill those in here, as well as put in more of a description if we wanted to, create a link to a URL or something else if we wanted to put some real information in terms of what this change request needs to be. So that was a window into the workflow management tool directly from Doors. So I can then, it opened it up directly in for me here. And now this is the web-based workflow management tool, formerly known as RTC. I can see it's requirement change request 289. The information in terms of when it was created, who created it, and all the attributes that we've just set can be seen from here as well. One of the key things we can see at the bottom here is this discussion thread. So as part of approving the workflow, approving this change request as part of the workflow, I can tag users in the system here, have a discussion about the change request as we're doing our impact assessment or deciding what needs to be updated. So again, it's all stored with the change request. It's not lost in an email. So if we do need to show why a change was made for audit reasons, it can be seen here. And some of the attributes on here are around the estimates. So if we wanted to actually go off and estimate how long this would take to implement, we can, put a number of hours, days, weeks potentially that this would take, and this all rolls up to do project planning, so you can see progress against that as things get resolved. So again, that's not something we're going to be focusing on today. That was the topic of a previous webinar. So if you do want to see more on the project planning side, I'd encourage you to go and look back at the recording that was made in terms of that previous webinar. So we've created the change request. I've filled in some attributes, and I'm going to start working on that now. So there's a workflow associated with this change request. It's gone from new, it's now in the in progress state, meaning that we're actually working on it. And that's now in a state where we want to actually start making some changes against the requirements, you know, to show what actually will be updated as part of that. So again, I can, from within here, I can select hopefully a change request now. And previously it was blank, but now we've got this extra change request that's appearing here. So it's showing us it's in progress. It's giving us the summary of the actual change requirements. And this is part of the integration between the two tools. We didn't see a change request previously, but it's only showing us in progress change requests. So this has been a state that we've decided to show what change requests that are in this state. We want to be able to link our changes to it here. So, you know, we are making sure that we're linking to stuff that's at the correct state, not stuff that's already approved or draft or anything like that. We want to make sure this is correct here. So I can select that now, and the module reopens, and the grade text has disappeared. The grade background, we're in exclusive edit mode, so I'm making the changes now against that change request. So my normal user interface is restored effectively from Doorway's point of view. I can click into here and make some changes to say this needs to be 6 hours rather than 4 hours. I'll make a change to a couple of requirements here, as well as a different requirement down here where we've got a weight requirement for in terms of the luggage that we need to carry. So I want to put in 300 kilograms there just to make another change. So, you know, I'm not making a single change to a requirement here. This could be several requirements that I'm updating. I could be updating the attributes as well, potentially. So it's a logical grouping of changes that I'm making. You know, lots of requirements might be affected. I want them all to be encapsulated within here as part of the same unit of work. And you'll notice now that when I save that, you know, the requirements do stay red, and they've not actually been committed to the database for the other team to see. What I also want to do at this point, I can just right-click on the requirement and put a comment in here, just to kind of explain what I've done potentially. But, you know, just in this case, I'm just going to put a simple comment in. And again, just gonna hit save. So from my point of view, I've made my changes. I'm happy with that. I can see those at the top of the module now, and I want to submit that to the review. So again, there's a peer review process that's happening here. I can't just go off and make all these changes myself. So I'm going to send that RCR, the requirement change request, off to be reviewed. It asks me to, you know, are you sure you want to do that? I'm just going to confirm. And then once you've sent that change request off, it's saying, do you want to reopen them in read-only mode? And I can do that to see the original module now. And if I open it in read-only mode, again, we get the grade text, but, you know, it still says 4 hours and 200 kilograms rather than 6, because the change hasn't actually been accepted into the overall repository yet. It's still kind of in flight, and we're still kind of working on it, and it's not been approved. If we switch back to the workflow management side now here, the tool is telling me I need to refresh because some changes have been made. We are currently in the in progress state. If I refresh that now, you see that the tool has already or automatically moved it into the reviewing state. So again, this is a state that we've included, a state action transition that we've included to say, once you know you send it to be reviewed from Doors, this is the state that I want you to move it into within the workflow management tool so we can track it. Excuse me. Yeah, that's just an example here, but there's various other ones that we can use to do that. And as part of the workflow process here, I can actually add a peer review step within the workflow. So I'm going to say this is the peer review that we want to do for this requirement changes, and add actual users within the system. So again, I'm doing it all myself, but in reality, this would be someone else within the team or multiple people within the team. And that would create a pending change request that would trigger email notifications to that user to give them a link to come back in so they can see, they need to go off and review this actual change before we can sign it off. So if we go back to doors, to do that review, again from this toolbar up here, I can review changes. And again, I've got my change request here that we've been working on. Again, it's showing me only the ones that are in the review, the change requests that are in the review state. And if I hit OK on that, the doors module opens with a separate view to show us a side-by-side comparison here. So once it's done that, gives us a brief summary to say what's been modified. So again, where you've got lots of changes, it's easy to see what's happened. But we have got this side-by-side view to say, it was red, it was 4, and we can see that it's red, it's now 6. Same for down here, and 200 has been changed to 300 kilograms in terms of luggage. So they're the 3 changes that have been made as part of this change request. This comments that we raised at the top there, we can see based on the research. So all that logic that you put in there to explain why you've made that change can be seen. But, as a reviewer here, the feedback that we got from the research, let's pretend that it was only related to the comfort of the car and not to do with the amount of luggage that needed to be carried by the car. So that's a change that shouldn't really be captured here. We want to focus on these top 2. They're the real ones that we need to update. So I'm not happy with that. There's extra changes in there that there shouldn't be. So I'm actually going to reject that change. So from within the workflow management tool, I can reject that from here to say I'm not happy with it. And again, it would go back through the feedback loop to make those changes. And I'm just going to close that comparison view to kind of back out that change that we're not happy with.
It's Carl. Just while you got a brief break, we do have a couple of questions. So when you're ready, we'll take those.
Yeah, it might be a good time to do that now.
Okay, yeah, as long as you're happy to. So we've got the first one. Can you have multiple change requests in progress or parallel changes on a single module?
Yes, you should be able to do that. So so we've only got the one that we're working through here. That change request that we're looking at, you could have multiple changes within there, or within the reviewed state or the approved state or the in progress state or whatever it was in flight, and they can all capture the changes. There will be a mechanism to resolve conflicts if stuff gets updated concurrently.
Okay. Second question, can a single change request affect objects in multiple modules?
So this is all within a module that we're working at here, unfortunately. So, this is all done within one module. You probably have to have multiple changes across different modules.
Okay. And then the final one, can you navigate from the change request in EWM or RTC to the objects it affects indoors?
So yes, once we have once we link the changes within the requirement space to the actual work item within workflow, it does store this tracked link. It isn't the most it is quite fragile. Sometimes it doesn't work. You need to try it a couple of times. But the link is stored here in terms of what actually is being updated from within the workflow, and you can follow that link, but occasionally it does just throw an error.
Okay. We've had just a reference for the first question. Chris says, can you have a multiple change requests in progress against a single object?
Say that again, sorry, Carl.
Reference Chris's first question, which was, can you have multiple change requests in progress on a single module? Chris has asked, can you have multiple change requests in progress against a single object?
Yes, I believe so. That makes sense. I believe so. I did see one of our colleagues, Ian, was on the line, so it might be worth just sending him a quick message on the chat because he should be able to confirm that, but I believe that is the case, that you can do that, yes. But Ian would know for sure, hopefully. Are you there? Can you hear me? Carl, we've lost you.
Yes, I can confirm that you can have multiple requests against the same object. You'll have to resolve the conflicts when they arise, but it can be done.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So it's that, back to the first point, where you have got multiple changes potentially against the same module. If there are conflicts, there is a resolution that needs to take place. You obviously, if there are overlapping changes, you would need to decide which one you want to keep, or what the merged version of those artifacts would be, but the system is designed to cope with that. That shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Matt. Sorry to interrupt the flow. Yeah, that's all the questions for now.
That's okay. So yeah, some good points there. This is a simple demo with one module, but this is it can be worked with multiple people within the same module, multiple artifacts. That's absolutely fine. So the workflow we were just talking through, we've rejected a change that we've made. So as part of the approval on here where I've rejected it, I've also marked that back to a reopen change request. So we've gone back a step in the process because we're not happy with it. So I can then open that change request up again within Doors and see the changes that were made in terms of we're back at the 6 hours and the 300 kilograms. And I think this is the one that I want to back out now. So I'm just going to reject that change to take it away because that's not something that should be captured as part of this change that we're making here. Asking for confirmation, and we've rejected that now. Again, we need to reopen the module to see what it looks like once that change has been made. We can open it up there. And if we look at the same review cycle, we can't see that yet because the work item is in the wrong state. So let's just close the back out of that. So again, this is just an example of the process being followed and being enforced. So the step I missed from the Doors module was to submit this for send it back to review. Once we've rejected that initial change. Reopen the module for us again. And then we want to refresh to see the latest changes. We're back in the reviewing state. And if we open up the module again, we should be able to review. And this time we'll see the two requirement changes, not the third one that's within there once it reloads. Again, it does this nice comparison view for us to see side by side what the differences are. And with our summary view, with just the two changes this time, and we've still got the requirement here that's shown in terms of the one that was originally changed, but there's no proposed values because we've rejected that change. So we can see the comments and everything else there and see that side-by-side view. And again, we are happy to close that, and we're going to try and force this change through now. Force is the wrong word to use, I guess, but make sure this change is applied fully to the actual requirement now. So we can close our comparison, and if we have a look, back in here in the work item, I'm going to mark that now as approved because I'm happy with that as a change in terms of where we are. If we go open up our read-only module again, we can try to accept the change or apply the change to the module. So we can see what change requests are ready to be applied. So again, we've got a blank list here because we're not in the correct state. Our work item, our change request here is still in the reviewing state. So again, this is part of the method enforcement where we want to make sure all our changes are approved and signed off before we make them. So within the workflow management now, I can try and approve this. But again, another example of how we can use the enforcement here it's preventing me from doing that change because we also have to have an approval as well as a review like we've got here. So again, this is all just me doing this in this example, but this would be other users doing the final sign-off for this change. And I'm just going to add myself again as the approver here. Still won't let me save because the approval actually hasn't been signed off yet. And you'll notice the work item automatically moves to approved for us there once that approval has been complete. So as far as we're concerned, the change request has been signed off. Again, all the discussion potentially that we could have with it will be stored there with that change. But now it's approved and it's signed off. Hopefully we should be able to refresh this view and we can now see our change requests has come through. So again, we're only looking for change requests that are approved. They're the only types of change requests that we can actually apply to our module. So again, I can do an apply whole or an apply all here for multiple changes if they exist. So again, the system will work out, you know, what those changes need to be and actually will apply them here. It gives us a summary at the bottom here in terms of what's been updated and how long it took. But now if we close that, you'll see the work items updated, but first we'll open up the read-only module again, and hopefully we should see our updated requirements in terms of the changes that we've made. So if I just expand that full screen, we've now got 6 hours, but we're still at 200 kilograms down here. So we've applied those 2 changes here, but not to this one directly here, obviously because we rejected it because it wasn't relevant. And the last piece from this work item side of view, again, the system has automatically moved the change request into an accepted state. So again, that's just our way of saying that the requirement changes have been successfully applied to the module. The requirements will reflect what was related in this change request. So very simple kind of workflow to talk through. The workflow that we've defined here is obviously one that we can use, but you could have something similar in place. And it's a little bit artificial, obviously, going through this on a single user basis. In reality, this would take place over, you know, a series of days or weeks potentially, with multiple users involved. So you're not just sat through going through it one by one. But this is just a level of control that you can, you know, a demonstration of the level of control that you can put in with DOORS 9 using the workflow management tool to track change requests against those requirements, approve them, sign off, all that sort of stuff. So if you are familiar with the workflow management tool, there's extra kind of process control things you can turn on, like mandatory attributes that are required once you get to certain states in the process. So the further through the sign-off you get, you might need attributes to be filled in, reasons, you know, investigation documents attached, all that sort of stuff potentially, as well as, you know, roll this stuff up to show, you know, what change requests have we got, you know, side by side, open versus closed, or, you know, you could have a swim lane view to show you each of these change requests in each of the states that we've gone through. And it's very simple then just to drag and drop stuff between them to move them through the states. So this is kind of like some simple views that you can have set up to show you how your change is progressing and what's going on here. So simple demo, hopefully that's made sense. It's something that can be turned on. We're looking at DOORS 9.7 here, but it does work in previous versions as well, potentially. You do need DOORS web access to allow it to communicate with the workflow management tools, but that's kind of just an extra piece that allows DOORS to communicate with the wider toolkit. So hopefully that's made sense. I guess we've had a few questions that have gone on already, but if there are any other ones, now will be the time to ask those.
So currently no other questions, Matt, in the queue, but just a reminder to those 2 other delegates, either come through the chat window or the Q&A pop out as well to ask a question to all panelists. But no, thank you, Matt. It's certainly interesting to see, and I think, you know, like we talked about earlier, if it's you know, it's very important to get these changes tracked and, you know, governed, so, you know, people can't just apply them wherever they want to, and so they are recognised. So yeah, I think it's clear to me. Hopefully it's been clear to the delegates. So thank you for taking us through that.
No problem. I guess one for Ian, if he's still on the line, would be what versions, how far back would this kind of support go, if he knows that off the top of his head? If not, it might be something to look up and publish afterwards. Sorry to put you on the spot, Ian.
You need to pair up the appropriate version of DAWs with the appropriate version of ELM, so that it does go back a few versions, back to version 5 of ELM if you really wanted to, but generally better to be on the latest version you can be of each tool.
Sure. So yeah, it's version 6, which is kind of the latest big version, would sound like that would be fine for most people on the call, in terms of supporting this workflow that we've gone through. So thank you, Ian.
Okay. Shall we switch back to the slides, Matt, very briefly? Is there anything else you want to say?
No, that was it. Thank you. Hopefully that was useful for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure it was. And if you do have any questions about your configuration and how it may be supported, then please reach out and let us know. So I just wanted to talk a bit about our next webinars. Some of you who have attended the previous 971s, DAWs 97, will be aware the next one in this series is about gaining engineering insights, which you'll be able to see on the right hand side there. But we are actually running another webinar on one of our service offerings that Persistent offers, on our managed service. So essentially this is removing the need to administer and take care of the back end solution. This is something that Persistent can do on your behalf. Now we can do this on site, which we are looking to do for large aerospace companies in the UK, and other defence customers as well, with very tight security arrangements. We do have UK citizens or local citizens if you are in other countries, but we can also offer this remotely. But it's basically allowing your team and yourselves as professionals to get on with your roles and not have to worry about backups or upgrades or things like that. So we can allow you to use the new functionality and the new tools as they become available to you, and released to the public. So we can run this across the engineering lifecycle and more. So we are running a webinar on this. It's on the 17th of December, so this time next week at 2 o'clock UK time. Again, there is a link there to a blog entry that one of our colleagues has written with the invitation to the webinar as well, but just giving you more information about the managed service and how it's helping customers around the world using the engineering lifecycle management solutions. Okay, is that it in terms of slides, Matt?
Yes, I think the next one's just a thank you. I guess the one point just to mention, obviously, is we're suspending the normal series, so to speak, the DAWs 9.7 series, until after Christmas now. So the next one will be the 14th of January, just to allow people who will be out of the office over the kind of Christmas period. So we're kind of suspending the 2-week cadence on this, and we will see you all hopefully in the new year.
It's a very good point, Matt. Thank you for raising that. It's something that Christmas is creeping up on us all. So I guess with that, it gives us a bit of extra time to hopefully get projects tied up and inboxes cleared before Christmas. So I can't see any more questions, Matt. So look, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you and Ian for your impromptu contribution, and more importantly, our delegates for attending. We do hope this has been of use to you. As we mentioned, the recording will be posted to the site very soon. We hope you can join us on future webinars, and if you do have any questions, my details are on the screen to get in touch. Once again, thank you very much. We can close the webinar there.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.